Well, good evening, IFL Nation, and welcome back to the lab for what will be the final time in this 2024 Indoor Football League season. More than delighted having you join me tonight to talk about last weekend that was, and the week to be, which happens to be championship weekend in the IFL. It is 9:30 over here on the East Coast in the middle of the week, which means it is Wager Wednesday in the Indoor Football League. I want to thank you again for taking time out of your night, tuning in, and getting a sneak preview of next Saturday's championship game between the Pirates and the Rattlers. For those of you who are brand new to the Indoor Football League or my channel, I want to welcome you aboard. My name is Alex Schuberth. I am a huge fan of this great league, and I also do some analysis as an IFL contributor over for Sports Coast to Coast, which is a Pacific Northwest-based sports forum site that specializes in coverage of the Indoor Football League and its member teams specifically. If you're looking for updated rosters, team-by-team breakdowns, game previews, recaps, anything you want covering A through Z that this great league has to offer, it's definitely worth checking out. I've put a link in the description. There you will also find my written version of my Wager Wednesday posts. So if you're curious as to any of the volumes that we've done so far, you can go back, dating back to when we first started this series last season. So thanks again for hopping on. And in just a few seconds, get the show on the road. All right, so here we are. We made it. It is championship weekend. Well, next weekend in the Indoor Football League. We started the season back in mid-March with 16 teams making a run for league supremacy. Fast forward 21 weeks and 134 games later, we're down to 2 teams. Coincidentally, the same 2 teams that battled against each other 3 years ago for this very league championship. So we are going to cover a lot of ground today with the episode. So, what happened last weekend? Well, we had a couple of games where one team showed up and the other, let's put it politely, they fell flat. We ended up splitting our picks. We got our pick correct in the Eastern final and missed the mark in the Western final. Exactly how the outcome of our conference championships picks panned out last season, interestingly enough. The Pirates, absolutely impressive game. Heck of a time for their best game of the season to date. They just went out and dominated against a Green Bay side that a lot of people had winning this game. It was largely fueled by a second quarter run that saw the Pirates score 27 unanswered points, and that pretty much took all of the energy out of the rush center and really made it tough for Green Bay to recover. They got to within something resembling striking distance a couple of different times, but never ended up getting that lead back down less than 16 in the end. So the Pirates, like I said, they play an amazing game, 51-28, the final at Green Bay. And it is the Pirates who finished the season at a meager 500 record, bouncing 2 13-3 opponents on the road en route to a second championship appearance in 4 seasons. And speaking of teams making their second championship appearance in 4 seasons, how about the Arizona Rattlers just dominating against the San Diego Strike Force? The Kevin Guy, Nate Davis combination, or that matchup rather, reared its ugly head again for Davis. He completed less than half of his passes. The Rattlers picked off 4 of them and returned 2 for touchdowns in the third quarter. And that really took any sort of guesswork out of the equation as to who was going to represent the West in the championship game on the 17th. Arizona played pretty much close to perfect football in their 58-23 win over the Strike Force. And so that is how we get to the IFL championship game. So obviously we've been hot to close out this season. We've accomplished quite a bit in a short sample size. Going back to week 18, we've won 75% of our wagers. And since week 14, we are returning close to 17% return of interest for anybody that has been tailing me from that point onward. We won't talk about what happened in weeks 4 through week 13, though. We'll just keep that between you and me for the folks who have stuck around with me throughout the full season. So ultimately, we will get to a full breakdown and preview of the championship game, where I will finally disclose my pick for the championship. That is, if you haven't already read my post over at SC2C already. So there are the results from this past week. Kind of went over the games already, but we had the Pirates covering a 7-point spread, which they did with their outright win by 23 points. And the Rattlers brutally decimating the San Diego Strike Force, a team that had lost its first 5 games by a combined 12 points. So that's the blessing and the curse of single elimination playoff football, is if you happen to have one down game at the worst possible time, it means doom. On the flip side, if you play your A game for a few straight weeks, you could be looking at greatness. So where do our bets stand currently when we look at this from a year-long reflection standpoint? Well, our spread bets, for the most part, were fantastic, fueled largely by our recognition of the immense value in betting on the underdogs, which on the season had cashed about 58% of games. Our 32 underdog selections converted at over 70%. So that is a massive overperformance, I guess you could call it, on a bet type that has just been oozing money, even going back to last year. Our underpicks as well were really successful, particularly to close out the season, where we went where we went a really good 8-2 in our last 10 under bets, with one of those losses being that miraculous Northern Arizona Bay Area game that saw a crazy sequence at the end as part of that Northern Arizona comeback, causing that wager to lose by the hook. So if some sort of normalcy had prevailed there, we're talking about 9 of our last 10 under bets cashing. Really, the one hindering aspect and story of this season, our inability to select underdogs outright the way that we had done in 2023, really shows that bet arguably is the game breaker as to whether you're making profit or not in the end. So it's a little bit of a preliminary look at some of the reflections on the 2024 season, which I'll be putting out a written column on after the IFL championship. So stay tuned for that as we make our way now to our updated lifetime results in this Wager Wednesday series. It is a convincingly positive record. We are 18 games above 500 on our picks. And even though 2024 has taken a little bit of a hit on the financial side, we're still operating at plus 11 units, which translates to an ROI of somewhere around the 4% threshold. Doesn't sound all that impressive at first glance, But when you play the long game for a prolonged stretch of time, the general convention is that you will lose. But the fact that we're still above with over 230 games under our belt is a super encouraging sign. And that is the challenge that 2025 will present to us. Can we continue to build and avoid a bunch of the setbacks that, say, the middle of this season threw at us? So here is the updated playoff bracket. It winds up being the two number 3 seeds advancing to the IFL championship. The Rattlers and the Pirates join the 2022 Quad City Steamwheelers as number 3 seeds to make the IFL championship. Interestingly, no number 1 or number 4 seeds have ever made it out in the current conference-based playoff format to make it all the way to the IFL championship. Pretty weird development, but it makes a little bit more sense when you think about the game-to-game parity that this league has to offer. I mean, we completed the circle of parity in week 11 or 12 for crying out loud. It really is any given Saturday in this league. And that's one of the many, many things that makes the IFL football so attractive from a fan's point of view. So it will be the rematch of the 2021 United Bowl, 3 years in the making. So time for my disclaimers. The lines and odds that we are going to use tonight are going to come from DraftKings Sportsbook. I may do something next Wednesday and a little bit more preparation for the game in taking a look at some of the offers from ESPN Bet. I'll take a little bit closer of a look this time around at some of the prop markets involving teams to score or not score on their opening drive. And you can go even more granular than that on ESPN Bet. You can guess touchdown, field goal, or no score if you want to make a pick at that specifically within ESPN Bet. So that's something that I might explore, maybe worth a discussion next week. But for our purposes right now, as we've done all season long, we're going to be using DraftKings. This series is not for the purposes of making money. We're here to have fun with our predictions and seeing if they stack up well against what ultimately happens. If you do decide to actually try your luck and you want to tail my bets, you're more than welcome to do so, but please gamble responsibly. Practice safe gaming habits, set limits, risk only what you can afford to lose. And if you or a loved one may be encountering a problem with problem gaming, there's a lot of resources online that you can go to that are immensely helpful in that regard. Haveagameplan.org, great example. That site has a bunch of resources that help debunk myths, answer questions, and refer to other sources of help for that matter. So that all being said, almost 15 minutes into the stream, we will talk about the IFL National Championship. So I'll blow this up a little bit for you guys to see. And here are the opening lines for the 2024 IFL National Championship. We have the Pirates out of the East and the Rattlers out of the West. Odds makers like Arizona to win this game. They're favored by 4 and the hook. Over-under is set at 86 and the hook. If you want to try your luck on the money line, the Pirates are plus 145 and the Rattlers are minus 175. One of the things, aside from the magnitude of the game, that makes it so exciting, especially with having the extra week off in between, is there is plenty of time to look at this game from a wide variety of different angles. A lot different than going on a weekly cadence. So the Pirates, having gotten here with an offense that has caught fire in the past couple months, paired with the defense that's been doing it all season long. For Arizona, the opposite is true. We know the offense is the embodiment of high floor, high ceiling. They were the 4th ranked scoring offense in the IFL, basically a lock to score at least 40 points in almost every game that they suited up with, particularly in games where Dalton Sneed was healthy. And we'll get to Sneed in a little bit here. And it's actually been the defense that had been a bit susceptible against the run at various times this year, closing that gap and playing very impressively. In their past 3 games, 34 allowed to San Antonio, 38 allowed to Vegas, and just 23 in their shutdown of San Diego on Monday night. So I mentioned Dalton Sneed here, and his involvement in this game, very significant. A lot of fans will remember Sneed was a member of the Bay Area Panthers team that last year rode the worst to first rate wave and defeated the Sioux Falls Storm to claim the IFL championship, a game in which Sneed was later named the game's most valuable player. Sneed has the opportunity to make IFL history if he's able to lead the Rattlers to their 7th all-time Indoor Football League championship. Only one other quarterback in IFL history has done that, and that was Chris Dixon in the very first 2 years of the Indoor Football League in its current state. Off the wall chiming in, thanks for hopping on. The 12-2 run since starting 1-3, impressive. Definitely so, and a lot of that early streak was still without Dalton Sneed, I believe, for either maybe 3 games early in that 12-2 run. Those were either Lorenzo Brown when he was with the team or Garrett Kettle in that starting spot. The Rattlers charting a very similar path to the way that their regular season panned out last year, when they started out under 500 for the first 5 or so games. Starting quarterback gets hurt, ultimately returns mid-season and leads the Rattlers to a really big winning streak before their first-round bow out to Northern Arizona a season ago. No such buzzard luck in the playoffs this year, though, as evidenced by the fact that they are here. So, like I said, Sneed's got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here, but to realize that dream, he's got to beat a team that he is winless against in 3 career starts in the Massachusetts Pirates. So that's one matchup to sort of keep in the back of your head when looking at perhaps the spread or the money line on this one. As far as the over-under goes, 86.5 is right around the range where I would have set this myself. It's perhaps a bit on the lower side, considering that 12 of Arizona's games out of their 18 have made it past this mark. Now for the Pirates, that number drops to 7 out of their 18 games that have seen 87 or more points scored. This one's really going to depend on the pace of the game and the tempo. The Pirates like to play games where they limit the opposition to as few possessions as possible. And the way that they best do that is to sustain lengthy scoring drives that take up 5, 6, 7 minutes off the clock and punctuate those drives with 6 or 7 points each time. When they do that, it wears down their opponent's defense while also keeping their defense fresh, which happens to be a top 3 unit in the league in points and yardage allowed. On another kind of streaky front, looking at the Pirates, if you look at their record, all 10 wins have come against the Eastern Conference. They are 0-3 against the Western Conference this season. The caveat there is that those margin of defeats, minimal. They lost by 1 to Northern Arizona, 1 to San Antonio, and 3 in a rematch with the Gunslingers about a few weeks after they had originally met in Lowell. So they've had close games, certainly. They just didn't happen to have that closing touch on them like we saw in the Frisco game a couple weeks ago. So what is my bet going to be here? I guess I'll start off similar to what I did last week in examining the bet types that I ultimately won't be going with, but I will offer opinion on which direction I would lean if I were going to do it. I'll start off with the spread. And I'll be open to admit 4.5 seems a little bit much to me as far as a point spread goes. And recent league history will kind of back that up as well. We had last year's title game, which Bay Area won by 10, but each of the past 4 championship games preceding that were all decided within this margin. We had Iowa win by 4 in 2018 against Sioux Falls. We had Sioux Falls beat Arizona by 3 the following year. The Pirates beat the Rattlers by 3 in overtime in 2021. And in 2022, Northern Arizona beat Quad City by just a 2-point total. So generally speaking, these IFL championship games, with the increase in overall league parity, are very close. And it always comes back to the situation that we talk about so often when we have spreads around this area. If we get a game that somehow, some way comes down to a field goal, you definitely want to be on the side with the underdog. A wager type, which, by the way, around 58-59% on the season if we include the playoffs as well. So if I were to pick one of these two, I'd actually take the points and go with the Pirates for that reason. They could also have a situation where, like we talked about before, they could very well dictate the pace of this game. Get the ball first, go on a 6-minute scoring drive, get a touchdown, set the tone that way. That's a formula that manifested itself perfectly in the Green Bay game back on Friday night. When I ran my model for this game, the Pirates are covering at this spread about 63% of the time. So there's tremendous value here for those looking for spread bets. For the over-under, I had mentioned earlier that this was a little bit on the lower side than what I would have originally expected. But my favorite pick among these two is the over at 86.5. Again, if we look back on IFL championship history, we've seen 7 of the most recent 9 IFL championships make it past this number, and 9 out of 14 overall have also gone over 86.5. And league-wide, the over, when set at 88.5 or below, generally tends to favor over bettors. We also could get a scenario like we did in 2021 in the off chance that the game reaches overtime. We could get more points scored that way if the bet actually does depend on it. And honestly, how can you go against Arizona's offense at this point? It's basically guaranteed that they're going to score at least 40 on a per game basis. And in fact, with Dalton Snead under center, they average over 50 points per game. they are arguably a top 2 or top 3 offense in this league when they have all of their stars healthy and ready to rock. The only guy that they're missing is Isaiah Houston at this point. Everybody else is in good shape and ready to go. And same deal with the Pirates as well. And they've been playing fantastic offensive football recently. After a first half of the season that kind of saw them sputter a little bit near the bottom 5 of the league in offense. So I just think both of those units are too hot right now to take the under. Obviously, some sudden takeaways here and there can certainly throw a wrench into that. But in the 2 games in Henderson, in both 22 and 23, we saw 92 points scored on both occasions. So could we perhaps get a third? So that is the direction I would lean for the over-under. I'll play the right side and go over. Which brings me now to my pick for the IFL championship. And you guys know me. I love my hometown Bay State Buccos as much as anything else. But there comes a time when I have to stop fading Arizona. I've done it more often than not, especially in the past 2 weeks. All that it has done is significantly burn me in the end. In fact, in my last 9 game picks involving Arizona, I am 2-7. So no time like the final game of the season to right that wrong and show a little bit of confidence that Arizona can win this game. You know for a fact that the events of 3 years ago is going to be squarely in the mind of these Rattlers players. And in particular, head coach Kevin Guy. He respects the heck out of this Pirates team if any of his interviews regarding them indicate anything. So, his preparation is going to be at a new level. His in-game coaching execution is going to be the same. And Arizona does win in about 56% of my simulations on my model. So I have to go with Arizona. They've kind of forced me into this spot. Maybe we get a reverse jinx and I somehow pick my Pirates to a title. That could be possibly in play as well. But Arizona money line at -175 is going to be my play in the quest for our 70th win of the 2024 season. And in case anybody was wondering about the futures market on DraftKings, it's going to be the exact same as it is on the single game picks. Every once in a while, across a bunch of other sports for championships, you might get different, more advantageous numbers, but we saw this last year in the Indoor Football League. The bookmakers have done their homework to ensure that no difference exists. So yeah, that is it. My pick is Arizona at -175 to win outright. We will have to see if that result holds. So that's going to be a wrap for Wager Wednesday. I want to thank you again for hopping on, looking at some of these picks. And for those of you who will be making the trip to Vegas, I wish you very safe travel. I hope to see you there because I will also be around the city that week. Off the Wall saying, great season. Loved seeing you in the stream. Likewise, my friend. Love what you're doing over there at Off the Wall as well. Kind of fostered a little bit of friendly competition there, especially at the end of the season, which I liked on our picks. So once again, I want to thank you for hopping on. I'll see you at the cashier. Good night.